Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's podcast. There's a bunch of cool stuff to talk about this week, so let's just jump right into it. First up, Voultar just released a video that shows you how to take a new adapter board that he's now selling and make repros out of original SNES cartridges. So this is the perfect device if you're looking to do something like dump your own ROM, maybe it's a Japanese-only cartridge, dump that ROM, then patch it with the English translation patch, and then solder this board on top of the old ROM chip, and then I believe you just have to do one disable on the old ROM chip, and that's it. You have the original PCB, you have the original cartridge, same exact ROM if you choose to use it, so you're dumping the original ROM that you own, which is 100% legal. And, I love stuff like this. Making your own ROM hacks is something that I think a lot of people would be into, especially when it's the fun and, I don't know if it's OCD or sentimental or whatever else, but I just love the thought of being able to dump the ROM from the cartridge I have in my hand. I know how silly that is. You could do checksums, you could make sure that it's identical to something you could download, but it's something that's important to some people, and being able to provide a way to do that that's non-destructive and that you could completely reverse if you should ever choose to, I think is absolutely awesome. So you could buy the boards directly from Voultar's shop. The video is obviously up for free for anybody that wants to watch it. And just on a personal note, some of the comments were really cracking me up. For anybody that doesn't already know this, Voultar does not sell ROM hacks. He's just selling the board that allows you to make your own. So enjoy, and to all the haters, I don't even know what I could possibly say to you on this one. A company called Antstream has just launched a Kickstarter campaign for a retro game streaming service. Their pitch is that they're aiming to launch the service in about a month's time for less than $10 per month, and anybody that subscribes could download their app across multiple platforms ranging from Xbox to Android, and then have access to their library of over 2,000 games. Now, their main focus is doing so in a legal way. So we're not talking about Soulja Boy putting a ton of stolen ROMs on a console and selling it that way. They're legally paying the rights holders to these games in order to do this. So that right there I love. But other than that, there are so many questions I have about this. And I think very often people interpret questions as negativity, just questions. But here's a couple big ones. First of all, the games themselves. So at the moment, their list of over 2,000 games seems to include a lot of public domain arcade games that are much older, as well as games from old consoles, old computers like the Commodore 64. And while I'm sure there's a market for those, it's certainly not games that I would be interested in for a monthly fee. But let's say that it's a if you build it, it will come scenario. Let's just say that once this gets rolling, they just have to launch with whatever they have. Maybe they get enough backing to stay alive for a year and hope that they get other developers on board. What's going to keep me coming back for $10 a month? So they said they were talking to SNK. Great, what if they get a couple of cool Neo Geo games on there? Why would I want to spend $10 a month to access those when I could just go buy the SNK collection? Or, depending on how serious you are about these things, buy them on different platforms. I already own a Super Nintendo and I want to play World Heroes. Why can't I just buy it that way for a few dollars and not spend a monthly fee? So the games and why I would keep coming back per month is something that they certainly would need to work on. But the experience is something that I think is equally as important. Sorry for the harsh cut mid-sentence. A truck just went by and blew its horn, and I didn't want to blow everybody's ears out here. But, so I think one of the biggest misconceptions when I talk about classic game experience is when I talk about things like poor emulation or lag ruining the experience. And I think so many people, if not most people, misinterpret that as I'm just being a perfectionist or I'm being a snooty, uppity gamer that only wants the best. And that's not at all what I'm talking about. I can't tell you how many scenarios I've run into where I've talked to people who've tried one of these terrible solutions, and maybe they were somebody that used to game on CRTs, on classic consoles, and now, or somebody that's never, a newer gamer that's never experienced those classic generations and wants to try them for the first time, and they use some terrible method, and they just think the game stinks. people that don't know what lag is, people that don't know what improper processing of video signals are, people that couldn't give a shit about what RGB is. All they know is they plugged in that Super Nintendo they had in their closet since they were a kid, and now it stinks. So now they think, oh, I must have remembered that being better than what it is. And now that's it. They're gone forever. So having an experience that brings people back, that's good enough, is going to be really tough. Because I think people seem to forget that a lot of companies that prey on that whole nostalgia thing, like Pound, you buy a Pound cable, you don't know anything about any of this stuff. You plug it in, you spend 5 minutes with it, and you go, oh, that game stinks, and you throw it in your closet. There, Pound got you. They got their one sale off you, and that's all they needed. So the company like this, who's trying to do something good, who's not trying to take people's money, they're just trying to have a monthly streaming service. Not only can they not put out the bad product like Pound would, they can't even put out a mediocre product. Because if you have people coming back enough, you're going to fizzle out if it's not a good experience. So if there's crashes or any kind of major slowdowns due to whatever platform you're using, if the controls don't work right, if you're talking about playing on touchscreens, good luck playing Sonic the Hedgehog on a touchscreen. I've tried, and while people like Christian Whitehead certainly got it as good as possible, for the most part, games that weren't designed to be played on a touchscreen don't do that well. Notwithstanding things like Night Trap and stuff, action scrolling games, arcade style games, really very often need a controller. So maybe the Xbox version of this app will work perfect. You could use the Xbox One controller. You could scale it to 4K if you have the Xbox One X. But I think that another big and legitimate concern for something like a streaming service like Antstream would be that you can't skimp on the experience. So it's not just the games, which is the conversation we started this rant with, but you have to be able to get good games across many different platforms, and then the ability to play those games has to keep people coming back. So, of course, there's a million cool things you could do. You could add some new emulation tricks to make them different and better than the original. Online scoreboards were things I believe they talked about. But just the bottom line is, while I love the idea behind this, those two things definitely concern me, as well as, which is nothing to do with Antstream, by the way, but it does concern me of who owns the rights now might not be the people that deserve to get the money. Now, that's an entirely different conversation that I'm not wasting anybody's time with, but I think my final thought for Antstream is that it seems like they're a company that's trying to do the right thing, but I don't know that it's possible to pull something like that off today. And I'm just afraid if a lot of people try something like this and fail, game developers will just ignore every company like this from then on because, the first few that tried failed. So I wish them the best of luck. I hope for their sake, and more importantly, no offense, but more importantly, I hope for everybody else's sake, the game developers, the rights owners, the people that want to play the games. I hope Antstream or somebody like them can come up with an idea that allows you to legally experience these the way that you want to. I just don't know if it's there yet. I think it would need a combination of hardware and software, as well as a lot of things around it. I mean, you'd have to get the best emulators on the planet. Some developers are willing to license them out, some aren't. There's just a lot more that goes into this than putting a couple of ROMs on an app and telling you could play them. Which, once again, I'm not accusing Antstream of trying to do anything bad. I think they're doing a good thing. I just don't know if they could pull it off. So, form your own opinion. Think about it however way you'd will. I don't think this is something that I'd be willing to back yet, just because I can't see myself coming back to this for that $10 a month. I just can't understand what they would offer that I couldn't get so many other places. But hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully they'll do well and kind of save ROMs for the future. And speaking of ROMs, Smoke Monster has just updated Project Peacock, which is something he'd been working on that gets all of the shmups from the PC Engine platform. So whether it was any of the Hue cards or CDs, now they're all together in one file structure so you can go through and have them all in one spot. So I think the PC Engine platform is kind of synonymous with good shmups. So this is a pretty fun thing to have. And if you're interested, just check out the EP forums link in the post. The team behind the game Tobu Girl has just opened up a Kickstarter campaign to try to get an enhanced deluxe version available in a physical cartridge on both the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. I'll admit that I'd never heard of the game until I read Smoke Monster's post, but I looked into it and it seemed pretty cool. So anybody that was looking to get one of these, either fans of the original or just wanted a cool new Game Boy Color game, check out the Kickstarter. And they're doing pretty well. It seems like they'll probably make their funding. But with stuff like this, especially because it's lower priced stuff like this, I never wait. I would always just, if I were interested in the game, I would just immediately back the Kickstarter and hope that it was funded. So anybody interested, check it out. Greg Collins has just uploaded another 3D print design file. This time it's for the internal cartridge slot of an N64. So if you want to use Japanese or North American games on the same N64, the cartridge shell just won't fit, so you could cut it, which I never like, or you could use this design. Now, I believe there was another design available out there before, but there were a few issues with it, so Greg just wanted to make his own and correct it. They're available to download for free. I'm hosting the files right here if anybody wants them. But also, Greg is selling them on his website, laserbear.net, which I know I've said this before, but I just love that. I think if you have a 3D printer, being able to enjoy this design is great, but there are so many of us out there that don't have 3D printers that want to support the original developer that makes these things, and now we can. So anybody looking to do this, now, technically, it will then fit cartridges for other reasons, but just keep in mind, if you're going from PAL to NTSC, you're going to need other mods on top of that. So this is really just for people that want to update the cartridge slot and use both Japanese and North American games on the same console. So, as always, thanks to Greg for posting these designs up, and can't wait to see what he comes up with next. Christoph has just added 2 more resolutions to the choices that you could add to the Time Sleuth lag testing device. The resolutions are WUXGA, which is 1920 by 1200, and UXGA, which is 1600 by 1200. Now, the Time Sleuth ships with 5 different resolutions programmed into this dial right here. And with this little programmer adapter, you could use a $5 or less JTAG programmer to update it. How it works is you just go to the site that's linked in this post, you select which resolution you want as each of the 5 positions, and hit Generate Firmware, and then use that flashing device just to flash the Time Sleuth with that firmware. So it's about as easy as you could imagine, and it's very cool that more resolutions keep getting added to this. I've also used this thing way more than I anticipated, and I know I do a lot more of this weird lag testing stuff than your average person, but I love this thing, and I hope that anybody that would ever have the need for something like this would pick it up, because I guarantee you'll find yourself using it more than you would have expected. McWill is now selling a backlit Game Boy Color kit on a few different web stores, and this comes just weeks after Ben Venn had announced his own backlit kit. So for the first time in years, Game Boy Color fans have real choices. It is my personal opinion, no offense, that the front light mods that were done on a lot of these just didn't hold up to what most people would expect these days from mods. And while in most cases it was better than nothing, assuming it was done right, a real true backlit screen would always be a better option. This screen is a 2:1 integer scale of the original Game Boy Color screen, so there should be no flickering or any weirdness or aspect ratio issues. And if people want, it'll also offer VGA output at 640 by 480 60 hertz. And with things like the Game Boy Consolizer starting to be able to be more available, or the Game Boy interface software, of course, for the GameCube, I'm not sure how many people would jump on this, but it is very cool just to know that it's an option. So all in all, it's exactly what you would hope from a McWill backlight screen. You could pick it up on Console 5 and dragonbox.de for $75 or €57.98. Sorry, I don't really know the exchange rate, but seems like an awesome thing to buy if you're a Game Boy Color fan, and I haven't had a chance to test one yet, but I hope to, because I think Game Boy Color might be the most comfortable of the old Nintendo handhelds, to me at least. And Cousin Scott's a massive fan, so maybe I'll just pick one up for him and do a quick review on it or something. But anybody interested, the links are all there, and I'm excited to finally play a Game Boy Color with a real backlit screen. Frank Strasser has just uploaded his design for a controller board that allows you to put a new PCB in a NES or third-party NES controller and use that on a Master System. So I think the most popular use case for this might be taking something like a brand new Hyperkin NES controller, which those have been hit or miss. I found some that were awesome and some that had a little bit of issues. But you take the internal circuit board and the cable out of that, and you replace it with Frank's board, and then just wire up your own Genesis cable. With doing this, you could be able to get the normal functionality of an SMS controller, but on a, in my opinion, more comfortable design. No offense, but I don't really use any of the original SMS square or rectangular controllers. They just didn't seem as comfortable to me. So that alone seems to be something that's a pretty easy upgrade that I think a lot of Master System users might be interested in. But the second part of this is a different PCB that you would solder to the inside of your Master System that allows you to also access reset and pause from this controller. So reset's nice. I probably wouldn't personally add that one just because I wouldn't want to hit it accidentally. But pause is cool, both for actual use as a pause button, but because a lot of other games later on in the SNES's life used pause to bring up menus. So you'd either have to constantly get up or sit next to the Master System, whereas this, now it's just wired directly into the controller. So I think this is pretty awesome. I'd also like to see this for, I mean, I know it's kind of useless to do to a 6-button controller, but you can get those Retrobit Genesis 6-button controllers very cheap these days. So being able to wire something like this into it, where you could just have a couple of the buttons maybe each use button 1 and button 2, or maybe Frank, maybe you could integrate turbo in some of these. But either way, just having that and the pause button right on one controller is a big help. And this also seems like a pretty cool project for beginners, because while I wouldn't call it easy, I mean, there's a few SMD resistors on it, there's not much that needs to be soldered, and it's something that, if I think anybody with some patience and the right tools could pull this one off. At least the controller side of things. I'm not sure about the internal SMS part, but just building this circuit board up and putting it in something like the Hyperkin NES controller would be kind of a fun first project for people, or a super easy project for experts. But either way, if anybody's interested in the design, the boards are up on OSH Park, and as always, thanks to Frank for sharing. The developer of the NES LCDMOD project has just announced an extension of that project that allows you to patch Lightgun ROMs to work with both flat-screen TVs and emulators. So the original ROM patch that he came up with allowed you to use certain light guns. So I found the Tomy Zap gun worked for me, but there were different results with different people. Different light guns would work if you just patched the ROM and played it on a flat screen. And I found the experience awesome. I loved playing Duck Hunt on a 65-inch screen. So I guess it's the same type of thing, but he's tweaking it to work with emulation in that scenario as well. So as soon as I get a chance, I'll let everybody know how that goes, and hopefully it's as fun as the original. And speaking of light guns, the developer behind the Sinden light gun project has now officially opened up Kickstarter orders, and they range from just software donations all the way up to purchasing a full gun kit for around $100, as well as a full gun kit with recoil running at about $170. And I'm really curious to see how this project does and how it affects people's perception of light gun games, because this one should theoretically work perfect, because it draws a line around the game image and then calibrates on your TV based on that. So it should theoretically work on everything from CRTs, plasma, LCD, OLED. It shouldn't make the slightest bit of a difference. And because it works directly through emulators, I think this might open up a totally different experience to some people. Because while many of us have played Duck Hunt or something, playing some of the original arcade light gun games that were, in my opinion, a lot of fun, just aren't possible these days unless you have original equipment or unless you spend quite a bit of time with an emulation setup. So having essentially a plug and play, then calibrate, then go type of thing might really open up Lightgun games to people that had never experienced them before. And I don't think lag is going to be nearly as big a deal when it comes to stuff like this, because if you think about it, you're shooting at whatever's on the screen. So even if it's emulation lag and display lag, as long as it can calibrate well so that wherever you're shooting on the screen at that time it's processed properly, it might not make that big of a difference. And it certainly didn't seem to when I was playing Duck Hunt through the patched ROM on the NES LCD project on my flat OLED TV. So I'm pretty excited to see how this turns out. And, like I said, the perception of Lightgun games now that it might be available to more people. And I haven't gotten a chance to try one or anything, but I'm really considering backing this project and seeing if I could, even on a CRT, hook up some old arcade Lightgun games through an emulator, through emulation of sorts, and just be able to experience them. But hopefully the project will do well, and if it's fully funded, it should ship in October of this year. Extrems has just found a bug that affects every piece of software that's 480p coming out of the Nintendo Wii. And I want to make sure I say that again so that people understand the gravity of this. The official Nintendo SDK, they call it the Nintendo Revolution SDK, had a bug in it that affects every piece of 480p software ever written for the Wii, which includes all commercial games and most homebrew, because the homebrew were all based off of that SDK. So what he found was essentially the way it talks to the DAC, the digital to analog video converter. On the link that's here, you can get all of the details, most of which are over my head, but I do understand the concept that the way the software talks to the DAC could create something that isn't properly represented and could cause some of the sharpness errors that you see on some model Wiis. The picture that's shown here is not going to come out right. If you want to show the real example, just right-click, save the image, and then open that up one-to-one in like MS Paint or something, and you can see the true. You could see a good example of how to visualize what the bug actually is. But the good news on this is it seems that it's at least possible that something like USB Loader would be able to launch both ripped and disk games in the same manner that you would a cheat code and patch this in real time. So in theory, you could get this bug bypassed just by launching it through a different loader, kind of like a lot of the stuff that you do with Swiss on the GameCube. The other good news is people that have installed the Wii Dual don't have this issue at all because the Wii Dual bypasses the Wii's DAC altogether. This is actually one of the things that I noticed that was pretty obvious to me in person, but I did an absolutely god-awful job representing in the video because of all the capture errors I was having now at the time, which I believe are mostly fixed now. So maybe someday I'll go back and be able to redo a Wii comparison that shows the different models, and now this bug that demonstrates at least part of, or maybe all of, why some of those models are blurrier than others. But very awesome finding. And I would like to take this opportunity to point out that the same week that a homebrew developer discovered a bug that Nintendo missed for 10 years is the same week that Nintendo went after Modern Vintage Gamer for talking about homebrew on the Switch. I think over the years people have heard lots of stories about Nintendo being the big evil company, and I would definitely have to say that, in my opinion at least, this is one of them. So for everybody that thinks homebrew only equals piracy, this is one of the many examples of how that's absolutely not true, and a loader software can be used to load original Wii discs and have them be improved as a result of hacking in homebrew. So you could go stick it, Big Nintendo, for handling it that way. And to be honest, the whole one company having so much control over your life and your livelihood has always bothered me. And even before this, I've started uploading videos to BitChute in Library, LBRY, I think you say it library, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, but I don't want that fear of getting shut down on YouTube and losing all of this just because of some rule that probably doesn't matter at all. So Modern Vintage Gamer is doing the same thing now, and I will start to post my stuff up on every platform. And I know it probably means I'll lose views on YouTube, but to be honest, I think the bigger picture is making sure that I continue to do these things and continue to keep this content out there. Because while, maybe losing one weekly podcast wouldn't exactly be the end of the world, considering maybe this stuff's outdated soon anyway, I would really hate to lose records of some of the research I've done, some of the, visual how-to guides that I've put out there, and it makes me very sad that one company could always hold threats over somebody's head. So screw it. I'm going everywhere now, and I believe a lot of other people are, including Modern Vintage Gamer. So I'll try to include links to the new places I upload things, at least on the web page posts of the weekly roundup, the one that I tweet every week. So anybody interested, check those platforms out. The bottom line is it's just a basic video service. They all have their quirks, but if you view on a PC, maybe that's better for you than YouTube. I don't really know. I don't want to ever run into what Modern Vintage Gamer is running into right now, where, an important part of his videos are getting threatened because one company's deciding to be a dick that week. So, what's wrong with you, Nintendo? Nintendo just released a new firmware for the Switch, and I thought there were two things worth mentioning. First, if you have a jailbreak on your Switch, don't upgrade to this one, because it looks like they patched a bunch of the security holes that allowed some of those jailbreak tweaks in Homebrew to happen. I still haven't jailbroken my Switch, but after what they were trying to do to Modern Vintage Gamer, I think I want to jailbreak it just out of principle. But also, this gives the update for moving individual game save files between Switch consoles. So apparently up till now, you could copy the entire content of one Switch to another, but you couldn't just copy one game save file, which was a pain for maybe families that had one Switch and then bought a second, and you couldn't move just one person's files from one to the other. So that's kind of interesting, and that led a few people to speculate that that's yet another sign that Nintendo will be releasing another version of the Switch later this year. Just the ability to transfer things back and forth better. I still don't think there's any word or any way to do cloud backups of these things, and that was my original reason for really wanting to jailbreak my Switch. At the time that the first jailbreak came out, I don't think I had finished Breath of the Wild, and I was many, many hours into that. So I just, to be honest, if something had happened to my Switch and I'd lost that save, I just would never play the game again. I would have never gone back to it. So the thought of being able to every once in a while just back up my save game, like I do with my EverDrives when I'm in the middle of a game or anything like that, that was very appealing to me. So I still think I'd like to hack my Switch. But it would be nice if they did something like cloud save game support. And I remember the reasons on why they didn't, but to be honest, it just sounded kind of like laziness to me. Like they knew how to solve it, but just didn't want to. So, oh well. But anybody around know the best guides for hacking your Switch? I think maybe it's time for me to do it. Capcom has just announced pre-orders for what they're calling their Home Arcade, which is a 2-player arcade stick shaped in the Capcom logo with a built-in emulator. It's going to sell for about $300 and is planned on shipping on October 25th, and includes 16 games that were original Capcom Play System games. So I definitely have some mixed feelings about this. The goal of a project like this would be to get it good enough where people could play it and either go, oh, awesome, this reminds me of playing it in an arcade, but now it's at my house. Cool, it's exactly what I hoped for. Or, of course, spark more interest. Like, oh, this is great, what else can I do? What about original? What about on other new platforms? And, whenever an experience like this is good, everybody wins, because new gamers are introduced to retro, companies get to sell more stuff, new versions of the game, or, there's more interest from classic gamers. But I have so many reservations about a $300 stick with Fireburned Alpha built in. I hope it's good, but like the analogy I made earlier, if it stinks, I don't want people playing this and thinking that this is what arcade games were like, and just ignoring the whole scene that's out there now, keeping the stuff alive and playing the best versions of it. And also the size kind of confused me. I get that there's shipping issues and stuff like that that people always have to worry about, but it's about the size, it's just less than 2 standard sized arcade sticks at the moment, which, you know, if you're marketing this to people who are either really big fans of the arcades or trying to be introduced to it, you're probably going to an older crowd, which are going to be physically bigger than they were when they were kids. So wouldn't you want to make the stick a little bit bigger? And it's funny too, because the dimensions are almost the same as the Deluxe stick that I've been using for a while now, that was recommended by some of the awesome fighting game players out here in New York. And I love that thing. You know, getting it on your lap, there's enough balance. It's just, it plays perfect. And it's one player. And this is pretty much the size, maybe a little bit smaller than the 2-player Capcom stick. So I don't know. Overall, I mean, I couldn't be happier with you know, the current CPS2 solution with Marcus's HDMI out, the Darksoft multi, and then just that basic I/O board. Or of course, I could always swap the HAS into it if I want to play on an RGB monitor. But you know, this definitely doesn't seem like it's designed for pros. And if pros use it, even though it does supposedly have good hardware in it, if pros use it, I would imagine that the first thing that they would do is gut it and then hook it up to a different solution they own, and maybe even a real CPS2 kit, which probably, you know, I know a few people around here that might buy one just because they like collecting these things, but I have a feeling that would be the first time that I see one of these, would be somebody who rewired it to work with a real CPS2 just for the heck of it. But I don't know. I hope Capcom at least spends some time in making it worth trying, and not just making it some glorified toy that people are going to think that that's what the arcade games were like. So I guess we'll find out in October. There's a new firmware for the Mega SG, both the official firmware and the jailbreak firmware, that includes a bunch of bug fixes and different tweaks. So if you're using it and everything's working fine for you, this one doesn't seem to be what I would call a necessity, but I would definitely look through these fixes and see if any of these apply to you, and if so, just go for it. Just remember that when you reset the firmware, it also resets all of your custom settings as well, which is my only hesitation in doing something like this. Otherwise, I normally say just upgrade. There's no downside to it. But also, just a reminder, if you own a Mega SG, there is absolutely zero reason not to just use the jailbreak firmware. You could always go back to the regular firmware. It's not going to hurt anything. You can't brick it. So feel free to just use it. And even if you already own a ROM cart like an EverDrive, where you're getting your SMS and your Genesis ROMs from, don't forget that this jailbreak also offers Game Gear and ColecoVision. So it just seems like the no-brainer to me. And links for everything are right here in the post, as well as a pretty good user guide. And this next thing is exactly why I won't be updating the firmware on my Mega SG. Firebrand X has posted a video that goes into detail on the pixel-perfect settings for each core of the Mega SG. For people that want to skip to the end, you could just check the description of his video and get all of the settings right there, which I'll admit I did that at first before going back and watching it. But Firebrand X does a really great job explaining why things are set the way they are, and really, after testing these out myself, they are as perfect as one could ask for. There might be some little tweaking going on in the future, but I would be very confident using these as my default settings. My only complaints about this are, when you reset your firmware, all of this is gone, and why wouldn't Analog just put this as their default settings? That's, you know, I can't think of a single negative reason why, and doing it this way, I guess your casual gamer wouldn't notice the difference, but just having something look better for free is something that I think any company might want to take advantage of. So if anybody's tight with that crew, maybe just send them a message or something and see what they think. I try not to bother Kevin too much. I think I frustrate him sometimes as it is. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't get it. I think Firebrand X did an amazing job. It was verified by a few people, including myself, who just played on my OLED and had a few people over to see it as well. And it just looks great. So if you have a Mega SG and you haven't done this yet, maybe upgrade the firmware first, then put on these settings, and just enjoy a really great image out of it. Samson 7.1 had posted an editorial on his blog about the historical impact of a profit-first video game industry, and I asked that he post a short summary of it on RetroRGB, and then of course link back to the whole thing. But this is something that I think all of us are running into now, and especially when it comes into the whole digital media versus physical media. And I had heard rumors of the new Xbox discless version coming out for $250 soon. And although I don't ever really want to post rumors on the website unless they're genuine and substantiated, I did want to mention that because my opinion on that might be different than most people would have thought. When you have physical media that's the whole game, things like you would buy these days from Limited Run Games, who I think's been doing a great job working on this stuff, I would always rather have physical media. So you own the game, you could always use it, period. But a lot of times when you get physical media these days, you're really just buying the right to download the game. Even some of the Switch games, people have taken pictures of just empty cases with just a cartridge, and then you put the cartridge in, and the first thing that's required is that you run an update. Same thing with discs. I've always complained about how whenever you put a disc game in the newer consoles, you save a bunch to the hard drive, then you download a 20 gig patch for it, and while you're technically buying the physical game, if that console dies and 15, 20 years from now you try to play it, if it works at all you're getting is that original buggy version without any of the updates. So I guess my opinion on all this is all or nothing. If you're going to make a physical copy of a game, make a physical copy of a game. Make it work. Try to find, if there is a huge update to a physical copy, that's what happens to the people that bought that. Try to find a way around it. And for things like the all-digital Xbox, if the price was right, I'd be totally cool with that. If you told me it was $15-20 a month to play every Xbox game, or you were going to charge half of a physical copy to get a digital only, and the moment, as long as it was very clear that the moment I canceled my service, that game was gone forever, I see that as a use case that a lot of people would enjoy. I think $250 is way too expensive for that console. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe they'll sell a gazillion of them, but I think if it was more like $150 or less, the thought of being able to pick up, an Xbox One X, for example, at $150, with a decent-sized hard drive in it, something that could hold at least a handful of games, I think that would be pretty appealing because I could play all the games that I like, and then eventually I might go back and buy physical copies of the ones that I really wanted to hold on to, but maybe by then I'd get the whole edition and not just a piece of it. So these are all things that I have no idea how to fix. I just wanted to share my thoughts on it, and I certainly would love to hear from the very awesome nerds that often comment from a technical perspective. Like, how could you even handle that? You wanted to get a game out on launch date, so is it that no physical media is released on launch dates, and they just come a month after the game, or more after the game was launched, to guarantee that you don't get a buggy version? Do you have trade-in programs? That seems like a nightmare to try to do a trade-in program. So is there a technically feasible way to solve this in today's era? Or are we all just doomed of digital only and then hoping more companies like Limited Run Games pop up to give us the physical releases when we want them? Either way, it's an interesting time, and I'm kind of curious to see how it's all going to pan out. Well, that's it for this week. Sorry for the couple of hard cuts in there. Usually if there's sirens or something, I'd stop and re-record the whole section, but I was running late on time, and there was just so much chaos outside today that it was getting impossible to even record this. So sorry about that. I try to keep that stuff to a minimum. But as always, thank you so much to everybody who watches and listens and comments and keeps it nice in the comments. It's always very much appreciated. And of course, thank you so much to all of the supporters, because it really keeps this stuff and all the behind the scenes cool stuff I'm working on going as well. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you next time.